So, there we go. Okay. Shalom, everyone. Chodesh Tov. I'm Sheva Chaya, and we're going to learn a little bit together. It's Rosh Chodesh for probably all of us, wherever we are, which is pretty special. And we're on separate parshas these days, if you're in Israel versus being outside of Israel. But it's Rosh Chodesh, second day of Rosh Chodesh in Israel already, and the first day in North America. So I'm going to share with you a bunch of different things today, and connected mostly with Rosh Chodesh, a little bit about the parsha, the parshas around this time. And we're going to start really with learning just about Rosh Chodesh to get into the mode. What is Rosh Chodesh? The beginning of the month. So as we've talked about before, we're all about beginnings. We're all about starting over, starting again, beginning, and in interesting ways. You know, we're affected by the world being challenging sometimes. There's darkness, there's light. We begin our days. Our day begins at nightfall, right? When the sun goes down, that's the beginning of the day. And the beginning of the month is when it's really it's not the full moon, it's a very relatively dark time of the month. It's when the first tiniest little crescent of the moon appears, and that's the beginning. So we're going to focus on this a little bit today, and I'm sure we'll, God willing, we'll get something out of it. So this is a teaching of Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach, and he's drawing from the teachings of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. And the topic is Rosh Chodesh, and it says tshuva. Rosh Chodesh, the new month, is basically the essence of tshuva, returning to God. Shabbos is not so much tshuva. Shabbos is mamish simcha, joy and oneg, bliss. Rosh Chodesh is mamish tshuva. Why is it tshuva? Because the moon begins to shine again at the new month. What is it when a person does tshuva? What happens to you? You're beginning to shine again. You were mamish dead before, and suddenly you begin to shine again. So how do you begin to shine? There's something very special in always becoming more, and more, and more, and more. Rosh Chodesh is not that suddenly the moon becomes more than last month. Rosh Chodesh is that the moon mamish stopped. There's no more moon, and then it begins again. Most people don't do tshuva because they always think the way it is now is the way it will be all the time. Tshuva is that at a certain period, I mamish say, no, it can't be like this anymore. And I mamish am getting off my high horse. I'm getting less and less and less and less. And at that moment, when it's clear to me that I'm mamish like dead, that is the way it's now, that the way it is now, mamish cannot continue. At that moment, I begin to shine again. Shabbos, therefore, does not need a beis din, a rabbinic court, to announce it, though Rosh Chodesh does need the tzaddikim, the holy people, to do it. So this is the first mitzvah that we got in the Torah, and we actively, basically make time, right? We basically declare the beginning of the month. It's an action that we need to be a part of. Why is this? Because there's a certain Torah which I can learn, such as if someone tells me, hey, you have to buy kosher meat, you have to light Shabbos candles, ben shlicht, at 5:25 p.m., that's something that I can learn. But then there are certain things that are so deep that unless I see people, mamish, doing it, I wouldn't know how to do it. So Rosh Chodesh has to be announced by the beis din of 71. The beis din of 71 were obviously the biggest tzaddikim, and they were the ones who mamish do it. They mamish have already reached the highest level, and yet they're thinking all the time, oh, I didn't do anything yet. It's not that they think I have to do more. There's something very holy in, I want to always be more. That's one thing, but that's not what Rosh Chodesh is all about. Rosh Chodesh is that I'm mamish like dead, chas v'shalom, nothing's there. The Gemara says, it says, Eina Torah mitkayemes ele b'yamei shemes atzmo elaha. It has a lot of meanings. The ordinary meaning is that the Torah is only when someone who is mamish completely... The Torah is only with someone who mamish completely kills his own ego, his own personal desires for the Torah. This is one meaning, but Rabbi Nachman says another meaning. Mamish, he has to make himself like dead. It means to feel like everything I did so far is nothing, mamish nothing. When God created the world, the sun and the moon had the same light. So the moon came to God, and this is from the Midrash, we all know. So the moon came to God and said, two kings having the same light, it doesn't go. So God said to the moon, okay, you become smaller. And not only does the moon become smaller, but the entire moon is constantly coming and going. The world always says that God was punishing the moon for the chutzpah, audacity of saying that. But obviously God was not punishing the moon. If God was punishing the moon, why is David HaMelech likened to the moon? The answer is that there is a light like the sun which is always the same. It's very holy, it's very beautiful, but the moon realizes that it has to be mamish deeper. Tshuva is deeper than all of this. Okay, we're going to go a little bit further with this. So this is very beautiful. So this is now about the Mittler Rebbe of Lubavitch. The Mittler Rebbe was, so to speak, the expert on Tshuva. Someone came to the Mittler Rebbe and said, Rebbe, I heard you're an expert in Tshuva. You wrote so many volumes of Tshuva. Can you please teach me how to do Tshuva? He said, the truth is, though I wrote so many Sfarim, holy books, I still don't know how to do Tshuva. On one hand, there's a Torah teaching that you can give over to somebody, and then there's a Torah teachings which you have to bring down to the world. They are not here yet. I can't tell you, this is the way you do Tshuva, like a cookbook. You put a little tshuva here, a little tshuva there, and you take a Baal Tshuva spoon and you make a tshuva soup. It doesn't go this way. Tshuva is something which doesn't exist in the world. It's not part of the world. Being part of the world means that it exists, and I do or don't do it. Tshuva kadma leolam means tshuva doesn't exist yet. It's not there yet. It's literally, it's before the world. So the moon was saying to God, it's got to be more than this. There has to be something from beyond the world. The deepest knowing, and therefore, the Beis Din HaGadol, only they knew something which, so to speak, doesn't exist yet. Tachas hayeda shelo neda, the deepest knowing is not knowing. Knowing how to make Rosh Chodesh is not the deepest knowing. It's like the deepest not knowing. So Rav Shlomo is very deep, and what he's giving over. On one hand, sometimes it sounds extra simple, but it's actually really something that's worth really contemplating for a while. The deepest knowing is really, really not knowing at all. So going on, what is the sun? The sun is God's light, and I can walk around all my life, and I think I really know all about God. And even if I do know a lot, maybe I may be the biggest Kabbalist, the biggest genius, the biggest Gaon, knowing every word of the Torah. Let's say I know a little bit about God. Still, Rosh Chodesh is when it's clear to me that I have no idea what God is all about. I don't know anything. Everybody knows that Torah Shebechtav, the written Torah, is the sun, and Torah Shebal Peh, the oral Torah, is the moon. How do I get to Torah Shebal Peh? I'm learning a pasuk, I'm learning a passage, and last year I thought I knew what it says, and this year it's clear to me that I don't have the faintest idea. I'm learning Gemara. I learned this Gemara 100 times. I know every word by heart. Suddenly something happens to me. It's clear to me that I don't know anything. Mamish nothing. Okay, so we'll leave that for now. Little introduction to Rosh Chodesh. Basically, the beginning of the month being before the moon shows itself. So maybe that's a little reflection of the fact that kind of darkest night before the moon is shining at all, before we see the moon shining at all, is it's reflecting this point of really realizing, what do we know? We really don't know anything. We're starting again. We're starting fresh from really recognizing that whatever we thought we knew, that was whatever it was. And now it's time to begin realizing that really from here we actually really don't know anything. So we're going to move now to the Bnei Yissaschar. And let's see if I have a little note here. So the Bnei Yissaschar is the master of time, and the beautiful book goes into every month, and I'm sure it's for a reason. This month, the month of Tammuz, and the next month, the month of Av, are put together in this book. It's not just the month of Tammuz on its own, it's Tammuz and Av. And they really do go together for a lot of reasons, and we're not going to get into all of them, but this part that I'm going to share, it does bring up both of them. And this 3-part series of classes that we have, starting with this one and a couple more coming up in the next few weeks through in getting us, ready for the 3 weeks. They really go together, the month of Tammuz and the month of Av. And every month, as we know, I'm going to read it inside a little bit. I'm just going to give a little introduction. That every month has certain attributes to it coming from the Sefer Yetzirah, and there's an aspect of a chush, something that we can recognize with either a part of our body or a function of our body that's connected to the month. So the month of Tammuz is connected to seeing, and the month of Av is connected to hearing. So we'll read inside what the Bnei Yissaschar says. We're in the first teaching on Tammuz and Av in Perek Gimel. Hine titbonen al pi sefer Yetzirah hanal chush hariyah b'nefesh hu neged Chodesh Tamuz b'shana v'chush hashmiya b'nefesh neged Chodesh Av b'shana. Hine timtza b'sidur hashvatim l'digleihem Yehuda Yissaschar Zavulun neged Nisan Iyar Sivan Degel Aleph Degel Bet Ruvain Shimon Gad. So if we're to contemplate what it says in Sefer Yetzirah, which was brought up before, this function of sight, which we have, is connected to the month of Tammuz, like we said, and the function of hearing is connected to the month of Av. As it says in Bamidbar, if you look at the formation of the Shvatim, of the tribes, the way that they stood in formation, certain tribes stood next to each other in formation, each with their flags. Yehuda and Yissaschar and Zevulun were together, which are reflecting the months of Nisan, Iyar, and Sivan. That's the first degel. And the second one, which is the time that we're connecting to right now, and that we're in right now, is Ruvain, Shimon, and Gad. And this Ruvain is connected to the month of Tammuz. This is the month that we're in now, and which is the month of the function of sight. And as it says, when Ruvain was born, the name itself of Ruvain is reflecting this. Leah, the mother of Ruvain, said when he was born, Ruvain Lashon Riyah, Ki Ra'ah Hashem Ba'anyi. Okay, the name Ruvain, the root of the name Ruvain is Re'eh, to see. So the tribe that's connected to the month that we're in, which is connected to sight, the very name of the head of the tribe, Ruvain, means sight. It's connected to Hashem seeing Leah's suffering, his mother. V'Shimon neged Chodesh Av hu neged Chush Hashmiya. And Shimon, the head of the tribe of Shimon, is connected to the month of Av, which is next month, which is connected to the function of hearing. And when Shimon was born, Alkein Amra Leah b'leidato, when he was born, what did Leah say? Lashon Shmiya, Ki Shama Hashem, Ki v'chule. That also the name of Shimon is connected to the function of the month. Shimon, the root of the name of Shimon is Shema, which has to do with hearing. V'hine timsa ot harishon b'shem Ruvain hu reish kamo ot harishon shel Riyah, v'kein ot harishon b'Shimon shin kamo ot harishon shel Shmiya. The Bnei Yissaschar points out that the first letter of the name of Ruvain is reish, which is also the first letter of the word Riyah, of sight. And the first letter of Shimon is the letter shin, which is also the first letter of the word shmiya, to hear. So the depths of all this, that is deeper. I find it interesting, but the depths of it sounds very deep to me. Let's see what the Bnei Yissaschar says. V'hine timsa ki hanesiim shel elu bet hashvatim shehem neged bet hachadashim b'od shayu Yisrael b'midbar era behem ma she'era tihine hamraglim alchu letur et haaretz b'kaf tet sivan mimele alchu b'tamuz chodesh hariyah v'yiru et haaretz v'yaniu et lev b'nei Yisrael v'chulei. So we see from these heads of the tribes, of these two tribes, which are connected to these 2 months, that when the Jewish people were in the desert, they saw what they saw. And the month that we're in now is about seeing. What did we see? In the month of Tammuz, the Meraglim, the spies, came to look at the land. They came to do their checking out of the land. This was on Kaf Tet Sivan. And so when they came into the land, they had the time that they were in the land was in this month, in the month of Tammuz, where they were seeing. They came in and using their sight to check out the land. As it says in Bamidbar, v'yiru et haaretz v'yaniu et lev b'nei Yisrael v'chulei v'nifgam chush hariyah. They, as we know, sadly, in the previous parsha, a couple parshas ago for us, and it's still, very, very strong. We just read it. The Meraglim came along, and they didn't see with good eyes. As we said in the last class, they saw with eyes of fear, and they brought back this fear and passed it on to the people. And then what happened? This it hurt us. It hurt us in our hearts, and it hurt our sight. Says the Bnei Yissaschar. V'hine v'yashuvu mitor haaretz miketz 40 yom b'chodesh av, chodesh hashmiyah, v'otzi diba al haaretz. They came back. The whole going around the land and checking it out was during Tammuz, and when they came back, it was already Av, the month of hearing. And there was the Bnei Yisrael, and they listened and heard what the spies had to say. V'tisa kol ha'eda v'itnu et kolam ki shamud divreihem v'nifgam b'chush hashmiyah. What happened when they heard these terrible words about the land of Israel? They heard it, and it hurt them. They cried, and the crying of all of the Galus started then and has been going on ever since then. And hopefully it'll stop soon, and we'll get through it. But from that point, our function of hearing was damaged. It was hurt. V'nigzra gzeira al elu bet hachodashim al ki yirachamim Hashem yitbarach b'mhera v'yameinu. So these are tough months. These are hard months. There was basically it was decreed that these 2 months, because this this happened in this time, the sight was hurt, the hearing was hurt. These months are a time of difficulty and pain until, God willing, Hashem will have Rahmanas, compassion on us and turn it around. It should happen really soon. וזה תמצא דבית נשיאים של אלו הבית שבטים, ראובן, שמעון, קיבלו פגם תקף בהיותם במדבר, אליצור בן שדאור, בעדת קורח. And this connects us to the Parsha, now in Chutz La'aretz for us in Israel. It was last week. The story, not only is it all packed in and all connected very, very tight so far up to this point, but it continues that the heads of these tribes, Reuven and Shimon, they received this. They were hurt. They were damaged in a certain way in hearing and in seeing, and this was passed down all the way through until the group of Korach. Zimri ben Salua hu Shlumiel kamo she'amru Razal. B'shitim, al kein anu mitpalalim hatei Elokai aznacha u'shma pekach einecha orei v'gomer, kedei shetukan riyah u'shmiah. So the terrible hurt that happened there, the falling in the seeing, not seeing the good, and then hearing and not hearing the good, and being damaged and being hurt in these ways, continues to play itself out. And we have in our prayers in response to this, praying that God will listen to us and open His eyes to us, and so that the seeing, so that the sight and the hearing will be healed. Al kain b'tu b'av shekvar kayama Seira ba'ashlemuta mitorurim harachamim shleimuta ratzon. And then we have, going further into the month of Av, where it comes around, and the hint of the greater healing that's still to come, and the healing that also comes every year happens there, because Tu B'Av comes, and there's an awakening of the compassion. God's compassion is awakened in that time. And then Banot Yisrael yotzim b'cholot b'kramim v'omrim b'chor sanet einecha orei. In the time of, the very difficult time of Tisha B'Av, and the very difficult times bichlal, it was hard for people to even exist, right? And existence, the basis of existence is life together, family, being together, making children, being together, and there's a certain type of almost stopping that happened also in Mitzrayim, also in the desert, in this time of Tisha B'Av. And then Tu B'Av came around, and they didn't, when it first happened, when they were first in the desert, they didn't know when it was going to end, right? Every Tisha B'Av, they would dig their own graves and lay in them, because they knew that they were dying off in that time. It was a very, very heavy and hard time. And then but the redemption is also always coming, and the symbol of that is Tu B'Av, which is just a few days after Tisha B'Av, because the year when it was time to go into Eretz Yisrael and not continue to lay down and die off in the desert, they saw the moon kept getting fuller and fuller until it became a full moon. It was obviously past Tisha B'Av, right? Tisha B'Av is not a full moon, it's the 9th of Av. They got to the full moon, it was a full moon, they saw, well, we didn't die, we're still alive, we're going through, we're going to get all the way through. And this is symbolized by the girls, the young women went out and they danced in circle dances, and they said to the boys, they said to the men, lift up your eyes and see. Again, the healing of sight, right? Not only the sight, also hearing. They hear their voices to look up, telling them to look up. They look up, which is also the healing of the sight. V'akol l'tikun elyon l'knesset Yisrael ben v'itbonen v'doresh v'kabel schar. It says the B'nai Yissaschar, if you contemplate this, it's very, very good. You'll receive lots of goodness will come to us. So these are things that we can contemplate more as we're just stepping into this time. So I was thinking, I really wanted to share. I love this book. This is yet another incredible book that Shlomo Katz put out, The Soul of Jerusalem. I'm sure you can order it online. And there are beautiful, beautiful teachings here about both the difficulties of the galus, of the difficult thousands of years that we've been going through, these times that we've been reflecting so far up to this point in this class, and also coming all the way through to the tikkun. So since we're headed in the direction of the fixing, so I wanted to focus in that direction and share with you, this is in chapter 7, called Seeing with God's Eyes. I thought it's connected because we're talking about sight in this month. Okay, says Rav Shlomo, I can walk in Yerushalayim and see a broken wall, but in the broken wall I can see the Beis HaMikdash. We can meet people. Some people we meet are broken, but if we have really good eyes, you know how to look at them. You see the Beis HaMikdash in each and every one of them. All we need is for someone to look at us with the right eyes. The spies came to Israel and they said it's a terrible country. The way it was, they were right. But why didn't they see how it would be in the future? Which is what we talked about in the last class. Just before last Shabbos, saying, the reflection of the Techelet, Domei Layam, the blue on the tzitzit. Why after, in the middle of these stories of the spies and coming into Israel, suddenly it's bringing up the mitzvah of tzitzit. Why? It says that I think it's in the Gemara, it says the techelet of the tzitzit, the blue string of the tzitzit, is domei l'yam, is like the sea, which is also blue. Ayam domei l'rakia, the sea is like the sky, like the heavens. So you're going from looking at a little string on the tzitzit to looking at the yam, which is expansive. It's incredible, it's huge, it's obviously beyond. And from there, raising your eyes even higher and looking at the heavens, which is lifting further and further up and opening up what we can imagine what we're seeing, from a tiny little string to seeing like this incredible, endless cosmic heavens. And then beyond that, Rakia Domele Kisia Kavod. And then it's beyond that, taking it one step even further. When we look at the sky, this is just like the string is reflecting the sea, and the sea is reflecting the heavens. The heavens are reflecting the Kisei Kavod. They're reflecting the throne of glory. And we obviously can't just see the throne of glory like it looks like a chair or something. Not so simple. It's something that we need to go beyond and use our imagination. And this is part of getting there. This is part of where we need to go. And maybe it's possible that the hurt, the brokenness in the sight that happened, maybe part of fixing it is really awakening our inner sight, awakening our imagination, our holy imagination, which is, I think, what Rav Shlomo was talking about here. When you look at a person, what you see in the person, just what you see on the surface, right there in that moment, in that present moment, you see who the person really could be. So a real Rebbe is looking at a person and seeing who they really could be. Imagine I go to the Holy Land many years ago before we came back, a terrible country. Imagine I have God's eyes. I would see how beautiful it is. I could look at a person, and this person looks terrible. If you have good eyes, you can see how beautiful they really are. When there's sunlight, I don't need good eyes. Things are clear. In the dark, then you need good eyes. When things aren't clear, that's when you need good eyes. Imagine that I love my wife very much. On a street corner, we say goodbye. She goes her way, I go mine. After 2 minutes, I look around. We're looking at each other all the time. You know what that look is? It's so dark. It's so dark outside. Where do I get what I need? To mamish make it in this world, I need Yerushalayim eyes. Those eyes that might have destruction right in front of them, but those same eyes see so much more than that. Aaron HaKohen was the high priest because he looked at every Yiddelah while he was holding a candle. You know how beautiful people look in candlelight? What's the difference between the sun, the moon, and a candle? The Gemara says Moshe Rabbeinu is the sun, Yeshua is the moon, and Aaron HaKohen is the master of the candle. It says in Bava Basra. With a candle, we see the deepest depths. Aaron brought peace. Aaron brought love and togetherness because he had the eyes. He had God's eyes, so he was able to bring us together. The more we get God's eyes, the more our lives come together. The more we see that we have what we need. We just never saw it before. We didn't have the right eyes. Okay, let's see here. Okay, they're all so good. I want to read all of them, but I also was going to read a few other things, so I'm going to save this for the end. Bezat Hashem. Okay, we're going to come back to this. It's a really good sefer. And we're going to jump to learning a little bit in Likutei Moharan, Rabbi Nachman. So whenever I think about this month, so there's a I'm not exactly sure where the source is, but it says there's the crying eyes of the women were crying, the crying eyes of the women of Tammuz, of this month, which reminds me of this teaching in Likutei Moharan, the teaching of Rabbi Nachman, that talks about crying. So this is Samech Zayin in the second section of Likutei Moharan. We're just going to read the first little part of it, a couple of paragraphs. And it's really deep, obviously, and we're going to read it. There's so much more to it than I can say, but sometimes just take something in, and then it'll do whatever it needs to do, God willing. So it says before the teaching itself, it says, Chibur hatala haTorah b'sofa. So we all know the beginning of the Torah and the end of the Torah. The first word of the Torah is Breshit, and the end of the Torah is Le'enei Kol Yisrael. So this is the beginning of this teaching. And if a beautiful teaching is if you really, the beginning and the end are connected. It's really a circle. It's not like a beginning and an end, a straight line. It's a circle. One is connected to the other. And we even have a scroll that's rolled up, right? And they're connected. if you take the last letter of the Torah as a lamed and the first letter of the Torah, which is a bet, it spells lev, which is nice, the heart. So it says at the very beginning, before even starting giving over this teaching, it says connecting the beginning of the Torah to its end. Breshit le'enei kol Yisrael. Ki yesh ananim dim chasyan al eina, shehem romi rabatai v'romi zirata. Kemuva. So there's my Aramaic reading. It says in the Gemara, it says actually in Raya Mahemna, that there are clouds that cover the eyes. Okay? And v'zeh b'chinat v'shavu ha'avim achara geshem. Zeh ma'or einayim. שהולך אחר הבכייה, כמו שאמרו רבותינו זיכרונם לברכה, שבת, שעל ידי הבכייה הולך ומסתלק מאור עיניים. So it says, this is connected, it says in Kohelet, the clouds went by after the rain, right? So when it's raining, it's very hard to see, right? There's rain on the window, you can't see very much out to the view. And when the clouds lift, then you can see again, right? This is what happens after crying. So when a person cries, when you're crying and there's tears in your eyes, you can't see. You try to see through tears in your eyes, you can't see through tears. But after the tears pass, there's a new seeing. כמו שאמרו רבותינו זיכרונם לברכה, שעל ידי הבכייה הולך ומסתלק מאור עיניהם. When a person is crying, the light of their eyes is gone. They're not able to see. וזה בחינת שקיעת האור במערב, כי במזרח חמה זורחת ובמערב שוקעת. And this is connected to the sun going down in the west, because the sun comes up in the east and it goes down in the west, as is found. Nimtza shemarav hu shkiat haor. In the west, the sun goes down. V'kol ze al yadei b'chinat habechi she'al yado mistalech me'or ha'einayim. So this poetic, beautiful Rabbi Nachman, what he's saying, I'm sure the deepest depths, saying that really when we see the sun come up and the sun go down, it's not just like a nature show. It's not like National Geographic. It's much more than that. This is actually the light of our eyes coming and going. This is like the light going down. Ki ma'arav rashi tevot Rachel mevaka al banea. We take the word ma'arav, where the sun goes down in the west, the Hebrew word ma'arav, and you take the letters of the word ma'arav, and this spells out the pasuk Rachel mevaka al banea, that Rachel cries for her children, which is a pasuk which is a very, very famous pasuk that is always reminding us that as long as we're in the galus, as long as we're waiting for the full redemption to come, that our Holy Mother Rachel, is crying over us. And this is Rashi Tevot, Ma'arav, the sun, like the sun going down. When we're crying, we can't see. This is from the Ari Kadosh. Ki shchina b'ma'arav, v'shchina bocha u'meyalelet, k'vyachol al Yisrael, b'chinat Rachel mevaka al banea. Me'ana yenachem al banea ki enenu. Shehi bocha al tzarat Yisrael. So Rachel was buried, as we know, in Beit Lechem, along the road, along the way. Why was she buried there and not in Hebron with the rest of the Avot and Imahot? She was buried there because she was along the way. She was always there, watching her children going to Galus and crying over them. And when we had to leave Israel, when we had to leave Yerushalayim, she was there, and we passed our mother, and she was crying for us. And as it says, it's connected to the west. The Shekhinah is in the west, and Rachel is crying. It says that Shekhinah is wailing and crying over Israel, just like Rachel is crying over her children, and and crying because they're gone, because we had to leave, because we're in Galus. She's crying over the pain of Israel. Ha-mefuzarim bagoyim ve'enam al makomam, and crying over the fact that we had to leave Israel, and they were all over the world, spread out in between peoples all over the world, and not in our true place. Valkein shkiata or b'marav. This is why the sun goes down in the west. Ki ayadea b'chia mistalek me'orinaim, because the sun going down in the west is that darkness is like the light of the eyes, which is gone. Shezeh b'chinat shkiata or kanam, v'zeh b'chinat kotel ha'maravi, shesham hashchina bocha u'meyalelet al churban beit hamikdash, ki b'marav sham Rachel mevacher al baneh. It connects it also to the kotel ha'maravi. Why is it called the western wall? It's for the same reason. It's the west. The west is reflecting this place. V'yesh me'orei or u'me'orei eish. There are two kinds of light in fire. If you vehem ze leumat ze. So I'll explain it first. So if you have say you're camping, you have a bonfire, you build a fire, and there's more than one kind of light there from the fire. The fire itself lets out light. You see because of the light of the fire, and the fire is also burning up the wood. So ma'orei or, there's two different aspects of this fire. The fire is giving light. On one hand, it's not destructive at all. It's giving light. It's making it possible to see. On the other hand, the fire is destroying the wood. It's making it into ash. V'hem ze l'umat ze. Ksheyesh koach ma'orei or, azai nichna'in ma'orei eish. V'chin lefech chas v'shalom. Each one affects the other. There's a balance going on. When the light of the fire is stronger, then the destruction of the fire is less. When the destruction of the fire is greater, God forbid, the light is less. Na'in v'nistalech me'orei or chas v'shalom azai mitgabrim me'orei esh v'zeh b'chinat churban beit hamikdash. This is the destruction of the temple. B'chinat mimarom shalach esh be'atzmotai. The fire came. The destructive fire came as opposed to the enlightening light of the fire. Ki nitgabru me'orei esh al yedei nistalku me'orei or b'chinat Rachel mevaker al baneh. How did the base of the mikdash get destroyed? Because the destructive side of the fire was stronger than the light of the fire, and this is reflected by Rachel crying over her children. Kia b'chia hu b'chinat istalkut me'orei or, because the crying is the aspect of losing the light of the eyes, right? The light side of fire, the illumination part of it, of giving light. Azai mitgabrim chas v'shalom me'orei eish b'chinat mimarom shalach eish. This is the strengthening of the destructive side of the fire. V'zeh b'chinat hit'alma v'nitalem ha'yofi v'aper shel kol ha'olam ki yesh tzadik shehu ha'yofi v'aper v'achein shel kol ha'olam kulo b'b'chinat v'yihi Yosef yafei toar v'yafei mareh b'chinat yafei nof misos kol ha'aretz. So when the destruction happens, the beauty of the world is hidden. And then Rabbi Nachman brings in this concept that he loves to bring in, which is a very important concept that maybe we're used to it, maybe we're not, maybe it's something that we should reflect on more. He brings up the idea of a tzaddik. Yes, there's such a thing as a person who has worked on themselves to such a point that they are the beauty and the grace of the whole world. Like Yosef, who was known as beautiful. He had a shining and beautiful face. As it's reflected in Tehillim, it says then it's reflecting Eretz Yisrael, a beautiful view, the glory, the beauty and joy of all of the earth, of all of the land. Kizeh tzaddik ha'amiti shehu b'chinat Yosef hu hahidur v'ayofi shel kol ha'olam kishezeh hayofi v'aper v'nitgaleh ba'olam. So this is the reflecting Yosef, who is the example of the tzaddik. And I'm not going to read further in here, but it goes on and on and on, and goes on about it very much and explains even more. But I think what we can pull out of this, connecting to what we were learning before, is about seeing and about looking in a good way, finding that healing in our sight, finding the light again in our eyes after all of the crying of all of the generations and hundreds of years of being in Galus and not being in our right place and not being in the land of Israel. The awakenings coming back to so the light, the Ma'ori or the light of the eyes is stronger, so we can see again, right? So that the clouds move away after all of this crying, that we can see again. So this is connected to the tzaddik. And Rabbi Nachman talks about this in many places, and he talks about it in very strong ways, what a tzaddik is, and he says very strongly and very clearly, this is in each and every one of us, that we all have this inside of us. We all have an untainted place inside of us that's a shining light, and we need to find it in ourselves, and we need to find it in each other. And this is like an exercise, right? Like, so if some people are into doing exercise, they go for a run, or they go for a jog, or they make sure that they stay in shape physically. But we also need to stay in shape spiritually and emotionally and mentally. And to stay in shape spiritually, we need to do this exercise of looking for the good, of awakening the light in our eyes, of awakening the light in each other's eyes. So when we see the good, like Reb Shlomo was saying in the Torah that we were reading just a moment ago, when a person is looking at another person, if they look with the right eyes, they're going to see how great that person is. And if they see how great that person is, that person themselves is going to know how great they are also. They're going to awaken the light in themselves and in their own eyes. They're going to lift out of that. And so the heaviness of the Galus is real. We're stepping into this a very intense phase of the year. And God willing, this will be the big turnaround where we realize that it's actually a big simcha these times, because the illuminating light will overpower the burning fire of that type of fire. And it's very possible that to tip the scales, we need to be proactive in every time that we stop and look again in a positive way at ourselves and at each other, and see the light in ourselves and each other. Our eyes are healing. The Ma'ori Or is stronger than the destructive light, the destructive fire. Okay, a little taste of that. Okay, a couple more things, and then we want to get back to this. This healing that we're talking about that needs to happen in our eyes. So I think it's very... I didn't go through the siddur and find all of the places, but I think it would be an interesting thing to do and a worthwhile thing to do, to go through the siddur and see how many times it brings up eyes, how many times when we're praying, when we're davening, we bring up eyes. So I was just thinking about it before the class. I thought about a couple of examples. In the Shmona Esrei, which we daven, we say every day, 1, 2, 3 times a day, v'techazene einenu b'shuvcha l'tzion barachamim, right? And which techazene einenu, our eyes will see, returning to Zion, right? Part of the redemption. How does the redemption come? We see it. We see it with our eyes. So our eyes need to be cleared of those clouds, right? We need to see the positive and also be besimcha enough to be able to see it and be able to receive it when it happens. But we're asking for this. We're asking to be able to see it. And it comes up also in the Kedusha, I think, on Shabbos. When the Chazrat HaShatz comes in, we say Ve'einenu tirena malchutecha, right? When this great day that we're waiting for, the description of how it's going to come down is that we see it, right? Our eyes will see that Hashem is the ruler of the world and the creator of the world, and our eyes will see truthfully, right? Because the difficulty and the negativity that our eyes have been so filled with in all this time of Galus is how real it is, in a sense, is how real we make it. If we're living in that, then that's the reality. If we're focusing on that, then that's the reality. If we make that tiny little shift within ourselves which is really, it's a leap of faith. It's a no, there's not necessarily something you're going to learn in school in science class, but taking that little jump and using our eyes to look for and see the good and focus on the fact that Hashem wants to bring the redemption, Hashem wants us to ask for that. Our minds are already there. We're already bringing it. We're already getting there by looking at it that way and thinking about it that way. So I want to jump to something in the parsha where we are now here in Eretz Yisrael. Let's see, that's this one. Yes. So the parsha in Eretz Yisrael this week is Chukat. And this little piece is from Likutei Halachot, the teachings of Reb Nassan, the main student of Rabbi Nachman, who brought, connected to the teachings of Rabbi Nachman, in which are Likutei Moharan, which we read a moment ago, brought teachings connected to halacha, further giving a Hasidic approach to understand on a deep level something about ourselves, something about our lives from this. So there's just a short little piece. It's really beautiful, and I think it's really connected to all these things that we're learning today. Zot chukat Torah v'chulei, para aduma. So chukat, the Torah of chukat, is about this very mysterious mitzvah, which is it has its own specific name, a type of mitzvah, which is like the hard to understand, can't understand it type of mitzvah. Chukat, it's just something that just is. It's not something that you could just figure out and explain why. Is the red heifer, the red cow, which brought us it brought us to a place of purity. It brought us from a place of impurity, which could say not being able to see with eyes of light, only seeing negativity in ourselves and each other, in the history of the world and what's going on around us. And coming to a place of purity. It says here, "V'al yedei she'maminim b'v'chinat chukat haTorah, dahaynu b'v'chinat ha'makifim ha'elyonim ha'kadoshim she'i efshar lehavinam, al yedei zeh b'atzmo meirin ha'mekifim, v'zocheh shitgaleh ha'erat ha'sechel b'shleimut ma she'efshar le'enoshi lehavin." By believing in this type of a mitzvah that we can't, the non-understandable type of a mitzvah, but believing it's something that we should do anyway, which is described as a makifim, the highest makifim and the holiest makifim. So we have what we already understand, right? It's printed on paper, it's words, it's text, we can study it, there are commentaries on it, we understand it, it has literal revealed details in it, and then we have everything surrounding that. Makifim means a surrounding light, right? So just beyond what we actually understand, like there's like a person's head, just beyond the person's head, there's what hasn't gone in the head yet, right? And we need to pull them in. We need to go further, and we need to understand more all the time. So a chok, something that is not understandable, is like this. It's something that's beyond what's in my head and I already understand is already in there, understand it. What's around my head and beyond it is this something I don't understand yet, but believing that it's there. This in itself, it says it lights up the makifim, and by this there is an awakening, our intellectual, our minds awaken and have a revelation of what is possible for a human being to understand. So by believing in something that we can't understand, we awaken in our minds much more of what we can understand. And by this happening, by this little awakening in our minds, it makes us excited in our it's like a holy heart excitement, an awakening in our heart. Ad shalhevet halev ola tamid me'elea b'kedusha gedola. So then the heart is very awakened and rising upwards with a great holiness. V'nimshach halav tara para aduma nitar mikol hatumot. And this pulls in this purity that comes from this mitzvah of the red heifer, which clears out all of the tuma, all of the these heavy blocking screens between us and the truth of reality. So it's just a little piece, obviously very, very deep also, and again, something to contemplate. But why do I bring this? Because the simplicity, on one hand, it's like a very hard thing to do. You know, it's hard to believe something that I can't be explained. But taking that little leap of faith, it's like also, you know, when a person's crying, they can't see through their eyes. But if they, in their heart and in their minds, know they have faith, there's a deeper place inside of them that they believe that there's something going to be good on the other side of it. At some point, the clouds will pass and the crying will stop, and then we'll be able to see again. So just by that little tiny jump between where we are and where we know we're going, by doing that, everything opens up. The light comes in, we understand something a little bit more, our heart awakens, and we're purified. And this is connected to the Chukat, the Parah Adumah, which is the parsha that we're in here in Eretz Yisrael now. And in Chutz La'aretz, you'll get there soon, next week. Bezrat Hashem. Okay. Okay, a couple more things from Rav Shlomo. And now we're jumping back to this piece on Korach from Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach, and the piece is called "Am I for Real?" Just stay with me; it's worth it. When it came to Parsha Korach, the Yismach Moshe would say the following: "In one of the previous times I was here in the world, I was one of the people who went out with Moshe in Egypt. And I was there when the fight was going on between Korach and Moshe. I didn't mingle in because the craziest thing happened. I didn't know which side to be on. Korach was so holy that I mamish did not know if he was holier than Aaron. I simply did not know, so I stayed neutral." So the Yismach Moshe is a Hasidic master, and he's saying, I remember even, I was there when we left Egypt, and then we came upon this moment in the desert, this conflict between Korach and Moshe and Aaron, and I didn't know whose side to be on, so I stayed neutral. Remember, friends, the whole book of Bamidbar the whole book of Bamidbar is that we are not talking about ordinary sinners. The whole book of Bamidbar is talking about holy people who somewhere up there went wrong. The sad thing is that when you get mixed up on a very holy and high level, it's the hardest thing to fix and get out of. Let me ask you, are you failing grades in kindergarten? All kids in kindergarten go through kindergarten. When is it that you actually begin to fail grades? The more you advance, the more kids drop out because it's getting higher. In high school, you can still get away with a lot, but in college, you better be sharp. When it comes to writing your PhD, you better write something good. Imagine you want to be a professor and you write a book and you want people to read it. You better have something to say. Basically, the higher it gets, the more real it has to be. Since we Yiddelach are operating on the highest, we in the world have the most trouble with God because it has to be real. And if it's not real, it's not only bad, but sometimes you can't move on. So in a certain way, as a people going through the desert, we're going from grade to grade, and every grade goes through more and more birurim, clarifications. And here I want you to open your hearts. Reb Leibele says something unbelievable. I guess Reb Leibele Eger. It's not so hard to differentiate between good and evil. When I can see that something is bad and something else is good, I don't have to be such a holy genius to make the right decision. But to differentiate between holy and holier is the deepest thing in the world. The world always talks about good and evil. Korach is not about good and evil. The whole story of Korach is about holy and holier. When it comes to the tribe of Levi, it's so hard to understand. The tribe of Levi never did anything wrong. When it came to the golden calf, the Levim didn't participate. But one time here, the most horrible thing happens. The earth swallows up people from the tribe of Levi. To sift your way through this birur is the deepest refining of character. How do you know what the emes la'amito is in a situation like this? What do you know what the truth of the truth is? So the Meah Shiloach says something so strong. Korach says to Moshe and Aaron, Umadua Tisnas al Kehal Hashem. Why do you think you're better than us? Why are you the priest and the king? The Ishbitzer says that God chose you to be Levim. You didn't... Okay, sorry. The Ishbitzer says, when God chose you to be the Levim, you didn't ask your question then, Korach. You should have said, Moshe Rabbeinu, I don't want to be a Levi because everyone else is also holy. Then it was okay, but what about now? You see, Korach was saying to Aaron, why should you be the high priest? Why should you make yourself above everybody else? When you're better than somebody else, it's okay. But when somebody else is better than you walk up and start a whole civil rights movement. Friends, don't kid yourself. The world is like this. I'm allowed to be better than others, but who do you think you are if you think you're better than I? Therefore, the Kotzker Rebbe says on this parsha that two of the most powerful, important character traits a person has to attain is to be ne'eman and tamim. A person has to be faithful and simple. God says to Miriam and to Aaron that Moshe Rabbeinu is b'chol besi ne'emanhu. Moshe Rabbeinu is described as this. He's a faithful servant. A faithful servant doesn't serve God because it's good, because he feels it's sweet. Faithful means I'm doing it because God says so. It's kind of like chukat, right? Tamim, being whole, means being completely with it. Whole means that I'm so completely given to whatever God will say. It's when I'm so completely given to God, whatever God says will be okay with me. You see, Korach wanted to serve God, but Imamish wanted to be the holiest. Aaron was ready to serve God even if he was the lowest. He didn't care, and therefore he really was the holiest. Same with Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu was chosen to go up to Mount Sinai because Moshe Rabbeinu didn't want to go up to Mount Sinai. You know what Moshe Rabbeinu felt on Mount Sinai? If God would have chosen somebody else, he would have been just as happy, absolutely just as happy. Israel should know what God has to say, that it's the most important thing, since Moshe was the only one who just wanted God to tell him what it is. It didn't matter to him. Therefore, he was the only one who was chosen. The other ones, it really mattered to them if it was them or someone else. The moment it matters to you if it's you or somebody else, you cannot go up to Mount Sinai. You cannot be a high priest or a leader unless it doesn't matter to you who it is. Hold on a second. It's not letting me see the rest of it. I don't know why. Okay, technological issues. Let's see. Alright, there's a little bit more there, but it's really great, but it's not letting me open it up. So we'll jump to the last thing anyway, because we're running out of time. And there's a bit more that I wanted to share. Okay, so jumping back to the Soul of Jerusalem, this book that Shlomo Katz put together, Yesher Koach Gadol. It's a really awesome compilation. And again, seeing with God's eyes, this chapter. And this is towards the end of the chapter. I skipped the middle. The middle is also really great. Very worthwhile in reading. So I've brought this up before, but I really love this idea, and we're going to read it in Rav Shlomo's words. Every day we say in our prayers, Shema Yisrael. If you know Hebrew, you know that Shema means to hear. Hear, O Israel. But the Zohar HaKodesh says that the word Shema, the Hebrew letters Shin, Mem, Ayin, stand for Se'u Marom Einechem. Lift up your eyes high. So Shema means both hearing and seeing. Because if you only hear, but you don't see, you can be thrown off. You have to hear something so deeply that you mamish start to see it. Let's be real. I don't notice most things, meaning I don't see them until someone points them out. That means that seeing actually begins with hearing. Some people come to Yerushalayim, the holy city, and don't see anything. And some people come to Yerushalayim and see everything. It depends who took them to Yerushalayim. What explanations did they hear while they were looking at the holy wall? Did they go with some kind of expert travel guide who told them exactly when the wall was built, exactly when this corner was built, and so on? If so, they didn't actually see the Kotel at all. Hopefully, they went with a different kind of guide who told them, do you know what the holy wall really was? It was part of the Beis HaMikdash. It held up the Beis HaMikdash. And then, only then, do people begin to mamish see it. So Shema is Su Marom Einechem. Lift your eyes up high. Some people have a tendency to always look down. They look down at others, they look down at themselves, they even look down at God. Being enslaved to the world means that your eyes are always down. You always look down on everything, down on the world, down on Yiddishkeit, even down on yourself, and everyone looks down on you. Everything is down. Some people have the ability to make you look down on everything. These are the people who are enslaved to this world. They are slave people. But Marom means very high. Shamayim is heaven. But Marom means connecting Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shamayim, receiving upon yourself the yoke of heaven. This is much higher than just heaven itself. So when we're being told to look high in this Shema, where we're listening and we're hearing, it's not just to look high, it's to look very, very, very high. There are people who are mamash only servants of God. They look up to God, they look up to you, they make you feel like they're looking up to you. They look up to their neshamas. They make your eyes always look up high. It's a different kind of looking with a different kind of eyes. These are God's eyes. These are the eyes of Shabbos. These are the eyes of Yerushalayim. So we should be zoche to have these eyes, and for ourselves and for each other and for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the heaviness of these times should not get us down. We should just go higher and higher and lift ourselves and each other and the whole world out of it. Because we must be here to do that. Because we're here. That must be what we're here for. So I give us a bracha to do that. I really appreciate everyone joining and blessing everyone with a beautiful month. The clouds should lift, and we should see what's true and what's real. We should see the light of the fire should be much stronger than the destruction of the fire. And we should see the good in ourselves and each other. And thank you so much. Have a beautiful week. Chodesh Tov to everyone. If anyone has a question, I'm here. You can unmute yourself and say something if you want. Now's a good time. Tov. All right, guys. So we'll be sending out more messages of the next classes. Please continue to join us and learn, and be good to yourselves, be good to each other. Chodesh Tov. Toda.